Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast.
Two women with 50 years plus of marketing
Integrity
experience.
and culture are extremely
You
important.
can still say, I don't know.
Stop multitasking and be present in the
Moms
moment.
have balls, big time.
Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast. We are two women with more than 50 years of marketing and advertising experience between us, and we want to talk about the struggles, the fails, and the wins that we experienced while building our careers, being a boss, juggling work and a home life, and arguably the hardest and yet most fulfilling job, being a mom. This podcast was created for marketing and advertising professionals, especially the up-and-coming marketing stars of the future. We hope these tips, tricks, and advice will help you navigate work and life and get ahead.
Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast. Today's episode is called Surviving and Thriving After a Layoff with ElizabethColuby. After 30 years in corporate leadership roles at top U.S. banks and tech companies, Elizabeth was laid off earlier this year and is now a business coach and consultant. Her superpower is operating at the intersection of strategy, leadership, marketing, and digital transformation, translating vision and goals into executable action plans to help businesses grow. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate this.
I'm happy to have this conversation right now because it's impacted me. It impacts many people around the country. And I want to talk for a minute about some basic stats about layoffs because I kind of had to look some of this up because I was a little surprised at how much it impacts people. I found that 40% of Americans have been laid off or terminated from a job at least once. 28% of Americans have been laid off in the last 2 years alone. And that the advertising industry, of course, ranks the worst at layoffs at 83%. The other thing that you found was a recent article in Forbes that stated that layoffs are up 200% year over year. And then beyond that, nearly half of employed Americans, about 48%, suffer from layoff anxiety. So it's a lot of stress in the workplace right now, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Especially, and the people who weren't laid off are as stressed. You know, if you get laid off, you have to look for a new job. If you don't get laid off, they say they're going to reduce the amount of work, but I've never seen that happen. It's always try and get it all done with people. So there's stress all over, but being laid off and not knowing what your next role is pretty impactful to the whole family and the economy.
Well, speaking of that, how many times have you been laid off in your career? And can you tell me a little bit about your initial reaction to being laid off and how you coped with the situation emotionally? Because there's an initial gut punch there.
There is. This is my second time being laid off. The first time was back in 2001, and it was a very interesting period. I was working in the Silicon Valley, and I survived 5 rounds of layoffs, which was great, over my pregnancy. So from January to September, there were 5 rounds of layoffs as I was getting larger and larger and larger. So on Tuesday, I was laid off. On Friday, my son was born. And on Monday, the company declared bankruptcy. So I actually survived to bankruptcy, which was fantastic, but it was also 2 weeks after 9/11. So there weren't a lot. The economy was already having some struggles earlier in the year, and it was hard to find a job. So I was unemployed for 13 months with a newborn, trying to figure out my next role and job. That was one very emotional experience all over the place. But my second time was just recently. It was in March of this year. And I had been survived many reorganizations between those two events. And always was the one of Elizabeth will figure it out. Let's put her in this situation where she doesn't know anything about that, but she'll figure it out. This time I wasn't. And this time I got some notice. And at first I was really disappointed, would be my major emotion, because I feel like I'm a really good worker. I'm a good employee. I contribute. I have value. And I felt like it wasn't being seen this time. So, but you know what? I happen to already have been working with a mindset coach about a 3-year plan, knowing that I was approaching retirement. I'm getting older. And what would that look like? And so I called her up and said, that 3-year plan just became a 2-month plan and we're doing it now. And just, as we'll talk about later, I have had transitions my entire life, change. And that's my attitude. Like, let's take this as an opportunity. Let's figure out how to make this the best opportunity, the best situation we can, and then go from there.
That makes a lot of sense. So you talk about transition and career transition. You also talked about moving a lot. You've lived in 30 places around the world. Can you talk about how the latest layoff actually impacted your career in terms of transitioning? And then, of course, how moving around, kind of makes you a lot more resilient in terms of having to face a lot of personal challenges over the years and kind of always being the new kid.
Exactly. So the most recent reorganization, layoff, whatever you want to call it, I'm staying put. I'm not physically moving right now. We will probably eventually, but it really changed the dynamics. The good thing was COVID. I mean, I got used to, I have an office set up at home and I just sort of took it over as my own business to go from corporate to entrepreneurship, spending a lot of time with other people who are going through a similar situation to network and guide. Because I've had my own business once in my career, but it was a physical retail store type of business and had to shut that down because it just wasn't getting enough revenue. So I have some experience with entrepreneurship, but not a lot. Most of my career has been with large US banks and tech companies, like you said. Transitions are, change is inevitable, and it's a part of everybody's life. And so, you can't fight it all. Sometimes you can fight it a little bit, but you really accept it, take the opportunity, move on. As you mentioned, this is my 30th home in my life. I've moved quite a bit. The average American lives in 7 homes in their entire lives, and I'm on house number 30, and we're not done yet. And that really made me, all those transitions really started about 8 years old to my mid 30s. Yeah. And they really made me open to change and trying new things and accepting risks but also knowing, resiliency, bounce back, figure out what you can do best. So I talked about a little bit ago about a situation where they put me in a new job where I had no experience. So my background is targeted marketing, and then I went to marketing strategy. And in one of the reorgs, and I've always been in banking on the checking side of the business. So one of the reorgs, the leadership came to me and said, "Hey, Elizabeth, why don't you take over sales support for Merrill Edge Investments?" I'm like, never done sales support and I know nothing about investments, but okay. And then I went in there saying, okay, this team's been around for 10 years. They know the product. I can't out product market them. What can I do? Well, Merrill Edge and Merrill Lynch had recently been acquired by Bank of America. So part of my focus was explaining and helping them understand how to do the business and get things done within Bank of America. As well as we had just launched a new human era type of our brand, meaning talking shoulder to shoulder, not across the table, being really human in our language. And one of the projects we did was we simplified the marketing and the sales assets. One piece was a 4-page text document about mutual funds. We took that to a 1-page infographic by eliminating information that wasn't relevant to this audience, that was redundant, that was just too detailed. And we were able to really make some great success on a lot of the others. But that was the one I was most proud of because it was the most extreme that we were able to do.
So when you transitioned from your last position to what you're doing today to being a coach, talk to me about that transition and how did you decide to literally change careers?
True. So I had always thought about coaching, consulting, board work for when I retired. So that's why last November, I started working with the mindset coach and saying, let's put together a 3-year plan. I had moved from Charlotte, North Carolina to Cleveland, Ohio for my last job back 5 years ago. And when I left Charlotte, I was guest lecturing, I was on nonprofits, I was doing things like that in the community, moved up to Cleveland, brand new job, brand new company, pretty intense boss, and COVID hit. So I look back on those 5 years and I'm like, wow, I've actually taken a step back because I'm not doing any of that prep work. So I engaged with a coach of my own to just build a plan. It was somebody I had known and worked with at the last role. So she understood where I was coming from and saying, okay, how do I plan for this transition? That started in November. We were working together. Come February, I got notice that I actually was lucky. I got a month's notice that I was being laid off. And so I was able to work with her in transition and said, okay, let's go do this. I mean, I got a decent severance package that has allowed me to do this. How do I make it work? How do I start? And at first I actually thought I wanted to do teaching at like a university level, and then decided coaching was better because it was more coming from me and I get to control it more. So I started working and networking and building my repertoire, taking a couple of online coaching classes that they have, these $49 things that are for 5-day challenges, just to see what was going on, and talking to people. Talked to some people at university and decided, no, I like coaching, consulting, trying to use my expertise. And then I also worked I'm on a board of a nonprofit here in Cleveland. So just accelerating all those things I had planned with some little pivots along the way in order to make this happen. So that is what I'm doing right now. And I am promoting it and working with clients and having a lot more fun than I had when I had to work within the political structure of the bank.
So to a certain extent, you being laid off led you to what you were meant to do, or what you felt like was more of your passion anyway? Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always been my passion. I love mentoring. I loved mentoring and coaching my team and other individuals within the extended team. I love coming in and solving a problem. One of the things I did transition during this is most of my career was in marketing. When I came to this new bank, I actually came to the product side to have P&L responsibility, which I'd done before, but again, P&L responsibility of working with marketing and sales, setting goals about household growth, and then growing the business. And then I had the opportunity to move over to software development and digital transformation. So actually the last 2 years, I was doing digital transformation, building the apps to open the accounts, clients or bankers opening the accounts at the bank. And one of the things I did when I was transitioning and going through the first couple months of this process is thinking back, I did a lot of retrospective work and decided I really like marketing the most. And that's what I want to go back to. And I like marketing because it has the problem solving and the creativity, but it has the short time frames too. So while I problem solved and launched things and was creative solutioning for digital transformation or new product development, those are 2 to 3 year timeframes. Marketing, especially campaigns and programs and things like that, can be a lot quicker, multiple in a year. And I'm an adrenaline junkie. I like that. I like figuring this out and being creative and really taking it from a perspective of, as I said, my background is direct mail. I started in Citibank credit cards, solicitations for opening checking credit cards. And the ugliest creative works, you keep it. And you keep doing the champion challenger. But if it works, it works. And that's the whole purpose in my mind of marketing is I have the saying that marketing only works when the marketing assets resonate with the client and motivate them to act. Doesn't matter if it's pretty. It's whether it connects and it motivates them to take the action we want them to take. So that's been my guiding light and my philosophy my entire career in marketing.
That's wonderful. And the change that you made obviously involves a lot of risk, but you seem to be used to a lot of risk having moved a lot. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of risk taking. And, did being laid off make you more of a risk taker, or were you already a risk taker?
I've been a risk taker my entire life, but it's all about risk mitigation. How do you minimize the risk or understand what risks are out there so you can quickly identify them and counteract them when they do come up? So I've always been a risk taker. I find that I'm a little less of a risk taker because I have a family now. I took a lot more risks when I was single and it was just me. I mean, I used to live in 2 military dictatorships, and under Pinochet, I was in Chile and went to a human rights protest because my friends were protesting and got caught and tear gassed. And, I knew that was a risk. I didn't quite prepare for it so well as I should have.
Yeah.
But it was an experience I've had and I can look back on, and makes me unique because I do things. I mean, I've been to lots of places. As we said, I've lived in 30 places, 5 countries and 8 US states. So I like really getting in and exploring a place more in the details than just just visiting for a vacation. So one of my goals, and one of the goals of making this transition, is to really be able to explore and have geographical freedom. Working for a US bank, I couldn't log in unless I was within the United States border because of security reasons. It makes sense. I want to be able to travel and live in other places. So with this business, I'm creating it so I can have geographical freedom. My ideal is that I will go to a country, one country a year, changing every year, for 2 to 3 months and be able to run my business and really have time to explore the area. So I have my list of 12 different places I want to live, from Paris to Sydney to Singapore to Frankfurt, that I want to live in, but really being able to explore, because those 1 or 2 week vacations just weren't enough for me. And as part of that, I've also committed to the year before I go anywhere, I study the language. So I just was studying Italian for an upcoming trip that we're hoping to make to Italy. And as well as I speak Spanish, Portuguese, and a little bit of Mandarin Chinese because I grew up I went to junior high school in Taiwan. And that was really the first place I lived outside the United States, was Taiwan.
That has really inspired me. I may be changing my personal and professional goals with that new geographic freedom idea. That's one I hadn't considered, and I absolutely love it. And that leads, to the next question, which we always talk about in the podcast, and as women, we always talk about, and that's this idea of work-life balance. You had a little bit of a different perspective on what work-life balance is. Could you kind of give me what your perspective is?
Yeah, so a lot of people think of work-life balance as like a seesaw definition where it has to be even. And I had an executive early in my career have a conversation with a group of us, and she suggested, don't define it as a seesaw of equality. Think of it as the balance definition in a musical instrument, music. So in an orchestra, some parts of the orchestra are working really hard. Some parts of the orchestra are not working really hard at that point. They balance each other. But as long as everything is flowing, there's balance. Everything is working together. So I take that definition and say, sometimes I have to lean into my career. Sometimes I have to lean into my family. But as long as it's flowing and I'm not stressed and having to push it to happen, then I'm in balance.
So your balance is kind of symphonic, right?
Yes, exactly.
I love that. So you and I have a mutual friend, and that is Annetta Kuzma. And Annetta and I did a podcast together called Tools to Avoid Burnout. And we talked about work-life balance, and her definition of work-life balance is the following. And I really love this definition. And she said that when our daily life choices do not align with the things that we say are most important and valuable to us, we are out of balance. And that was a big wow for me. And what it means to me is that we're each responsible for how we spend our time, not just our time from 9 to 5, but there's a lot of time outside of 9 to 5. And we start making choices and direct our life to the things that we do say are important to us, we do find the balance that we're looking for. And so that really resonated with me in terms of her definition. So I think both definitions work really well.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, let's jump into the insights and advice. And so what sort of advice would you give to other people that are in a similar situation, that are about to be laid off or have just been laid off? What are some things that that you think were helpful to the most to you? And then we'll go through kind of a list of some additional ones.
Sure. I mean, the first thing is to network. Don't go in there and go into a cocoon. Make sure your network knows what's going on, not in a negative or emotional way, but I'm in a new situation. I'm open to work. This is what I'm looking for, and really leverage that. Unfortunately, I don't have a great network in Cleveland because I was very internally focused in my last job. So that's what I'm struggling to work with right now, is how do I expand my network within the geography where I'm living right now, even though I want to be able to work worldwide, and I have a lot of clients in Asia and New Zealand and Europe and everything, but I still need to network here. Play to your strengths.
Yeah.
Figure out what you're really good at. Figure out what drives you and lights you up. So I could have easily transitioned to another digital transformation, software development role, because that was my most recent role. But when I reflected on it, I love it. I think it's great, but it doesn't light me up as much as marketing does, and helping businesses go from frustrated to confident in their marketing. So I pivoted back to marketing because that's actually the majority of my years of experience. It just wasn't my most recent one. And then try new things. So the last few months, I've been trying new things and talking to people about how they started their business or what are their challenges, and really figuring out where my niche was or is, so that I can really add value. So figure out what that, the whole term ikigai, I think is how you pronounce it.
Oh, yeah.
What you love to do, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you'd be paid for.
Yeah.
That combination is really what your mission is in life. And that's what will keep you motivated to go forward and work into, like, I'm not going to retire at 65. I'm going to retire probably at 80. I want to keep active because I know my brain goes to mush if I don't keep my brain active. So I want to keep my brain active as long as possible. Not probably the 50, 60 hours a week that we were working, but much more manageable and intellectually challenging work is what I'm looking for as I work with my clients.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about a couple other insights and tips. The first one would be assessing your finances and creating a budget, an emergency fund. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, when you're working, and especially if you're going into the situation, money's going to probably be top of mind. You have to pay your bills. So make sure you are as financially prudent as you can while you're working. Pay down your debt, get your emergency fund. 6 months of savings is the recommended, but also put things in place like a HELOC loan. So I learned this after the fact, didn't even think about it, of setting up a HELOC while I was still working. And then a couple months later, when we were trying to set up a HELOC, my severance check was not accepted as a payment because they knew it was going to end at a certain point. So we can't get a HELOC at this point because I don't have enough steady income yet to make it happen. So putting better to have it in place and not use it than to not have it and you have an emergency later on. The other thing I'd say to you is there are holds. Now it's been reduced, but when you make a deposit at a bank, there are holds put on the money. And they've been reduced a lot lately over the last few years. So 20 years ago, when I was laid off the first time, I took my severance check and physically walked it into the teller to be deposited on Tuesday. My friends who put it in the ATM Tuesday night, it didn't clear before the company went into bankruptcy on Monday morning. So then they had to sue in severance court to get their bankruptcy court to get their severance check, and some of them took 2 years to get their money. So just if you have a big check, walk it into the teller, cut that, because the teller accepted deposit has a lot lower risk to a bank's perspective than an ATM deposited check. So they hold it for a little bit shorter time period. In fact, I just deposited one, it was same day because of my relationship with the bank. But you don't want to get caught in those things. You want that cash you want that in hand as quickly as possible. So if you have a chance, walk it in. And then, of course, have a budget, eliminate unnecessary spending, look at all your subscriptions, get rid of anything you don't have to run the business, because you're going to have to invest in your business as you make this transition and get a new computer, get new monitors, get new whatever, set up your website, whatever it is. So eliminate some other expenses. You can always turn Hulu back on, but if you don't have to pay for it every month, that adds up.
That's true. That's true. What about on the emotional coping side? Because that's a big one in terms of, accepting your emotions and finding your support system and talking to people.
Yeah. I would say, it's emotional. getting laid off and feeling rejected or disappointed or whatever emotion you go through, try not to stay in that emotion. Try and move through it as quickly as possible and look for those opportunities. Take this as an opportunity, as I did, to try something new, to go in a new path, to accelerate your dreams, whatever it takes. Process the emotions, but move on, and know that while you have the emotions from the layoff or the transition, and then you have the emotions from starting a business, and the fears come up, and you have highs and lows in every day. I find that with Annetta, our mutual friend, she does a lot of breath work. That helps me.
Yes.
Meditation. I did a lot of journaling at the very beginning, just trying to get things out of me. Walks in the woods. I talk about forest bathing all the time. You know, going out in the woods and just being surrounded by nature calms you down and it lets you just process things. So, and then find other people to talk to, have a network. I have a couple different people I meet on a regular basis, every couple of weeks, every month, whatever it is, to talk about how is your business going? How can we work together? You know, give me some advice. One of them happens to be my former boss, so he knows me pretty well. Not the one that laid me off, the prior one, that. But at the same time, you know, we can, because we worked together for a number of years, you know, we can go deep into the conversation. We know each other's families and things like that, or at least the details around them, so that we can really not be isolated and have those connection points. And just connect with other people. I have a couple of different networking groups of all of us are trying to be consultants, and another one where they're coach, everybody's a coach, and I just get different things from different groups. But just make sure it's a supportive group that you're networking with, because you don't want anybody else pulling you down, because you're going to have enough highs and lows on your own.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's this time that it's always very important to kind of either establish or reestablish your own personal brand, right? And your online presence. Do you want to say anything about that and your resume?
Yeah, I mean, I updated my LinkedIn. I was lucky to get outplacement services. So I was working with a professional who helped me rewrite my resume and update my LinkedIn and things like that. I've also become much more active on Facebook, because that's where I'm finding some of my clients and networking and sharing my expertise to build my brand. And then it's just a matter of, you know, being really clear about who you are, what you provide, what you don't provide. I mean, one of the things, one exercise a different coach brought us through was, how do you profile the people you want to coach? This is a coaching program I'm in. And who do you want to repel? Like, actually, you want them to go away. And so what are the 5 characteristics of somebody you want and somebody you don't want? And that was a clarifying conversation to say, okay, these are the types of people I want to work with. And I want them to be coachable, and I want them to be positive, and I want them to be open-minded, and I want them to work hard and willing to do the work. Not somebody who's lazy, not coachable, you know, short-sighted, things like that. So it's all part of your brand and what you want to put out in the world.
So we've covered networking. We've kind of covered continuous learning. What about when you get to the job search and the application process?
I haven't done a lot this time, but I can talk about it, the things I've done in the past, as I'm really leaning into my entrepreneurship. You know, look for those jobs. I always say you are looking for a needle in a haystack. You only need one job.
Yeah.
So look for and put yourself out there. I have often applied for a job that wasn't quite right, but I was lucky in multiple occasions where the recruiter had a job that was perfect for me. I just didn't see it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, my background's product marketing, we talked about. When I first started at Bank of America, I actually applied for a multicultural brand marketing role, knowing I'm not really a brand marketer. I can do it, but I really love product marketing. And that's where the recruiter said, I actually have a product marketing role of the same level. It's just you didn't connect with it. So I'd say if it's in the right ballpark, going back to that whole statistic of women apply for jobs when they're 110% qualified, but men apply at 70. I try to apply at 70 or 80. I want a job that's going to challenge me, that I'm going to learn, that I'm going to grow. Why would I want to go to a job where I can do 110% of it? I already know everything. That would be boring to me. That's where I'm a risk taker. I figure I can figure it out. I'm smart enough. I have enough experience. I can ask the right questions. I'll figure it out. Now, I don't want to be learning 90% of my job, but you have to have that edge where you're learning part of your job, or you go stagnant. I get bored.
Yeah,
if I'm not
sure.
learning.
Sure. Well, that takes us kind of full circle back to all the other parts of your life, like staying healthy. And sometimes it is hard to stay healthy when you're really focused on, you're stressed, right? You're stressed on all these, you've just lost a job, you're worried about money, but that's even more important, right? When you focus on mindfulness and you focus on healthy eating and, mental and physical exercise.
Absolutely. And I'm lucky in that we have 2 dogs who love to go for walks and live in a neighborhood where they just put in sidewalks. So it's a little easier to go for walks around. I probably need to go to like a yoga or a Pilates class for my health. And that's something I'm holding back on because of the money. And I just want to make sure I spend it the right way. So I do some regular yoga, stretching, a lot of mindfulness, a lot of just virtual coffees with friends to connect and not feel so isolated. And I call them virtual coffees because, I don't care if we're having a drink or coffee, but it's just sort of like just non-agenda conversation to
I love
figure out what's going on. But yeah, if you don't keep your mind and your body healthy during this, you're going to have challenges. And so, you're bringing the whole you to the job and to your clients, and you need to be as healthy as possible. So I try. I'm not saying I'm going to be perfect, but just keeping the hormones as a woman in regulation and, trying to eat healthy and clean so that, I'm not doubling down on carbs and feeling lethargic in the middle of the day or relying on, sodas for pick-me-up. I haven't had sodas in years, except in drink. But those types of things are like really thinking about how do you show up, because as an entrepreneur, I can't rely on a 9-to-5 job. I'm working 10, 12 hours a day, but it's some things I love. So I have fun.
Love that. And then staying positive, right? I mean, obviously you're communicating that now. And if you're not positive, then, you're not going to attract the right things and the right people.
Optimistic. Yeah. Positive, optimistic, willing to go the extra mile to really help something come together. Those are all things that I think are critical. Because if you are a negative Nelly while you're trying to start a business, there's a reason why, 60% of businesses fail in the first year or something crazy.
Yeah.
Because if you can't have that optimism and that positive energy keeping you going through the hard times, then how do you keep going?
Any final parting thoughts on how to survive and thrive after a layoff?
I just reiterate, be positive, take it as an opportunity. And that's what I told myself and everybody else when they were laid off on my team. Take this as an opportunity, pivot, try something new, stretch yourself, grow. And most people look back and say it was a blessing in disguise. So I would suggest you to really try and figure out what that blessing is and take advantage of it, because we all have one life to live. Let's make it the best we can. Let's have fun.
And you will get through this, right?
You will get through this.
Thank you for your time, Elizabeth. I appreciate it.
No, this was fantastic. Thank you for your time.